Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Travel and Beyond podcast. This first episode is going to be an introduction to who I am, how I've ended up on this journey, and why I decided to start this podcast. So, first of all, an introduction to who I am. My name is Daisy. I'm 31 years old and currently living in Portsmouth on the south coast of the UK. This is where I was born, and this is where I spent most of my life when I was growing up and a large majority of my adult life as well. I'm currently in the process of trying to immigrate to Australia, and it has been a lifelong dream of mine. So I think where we need to start for this introductory episode is why I'm wanting to move to Australia and where this all started. So going back to early childhood, what I can say is I always had this obsession with wanting to live in another country. I don't know where it came from. I just always knew that I wanted to live somewhere outside of the UK. I then got this obsession with Australia for some reason. Again, I don't know why. I never had any family that had visited there. I never had any friends that had visited there. I just had this real big interest in it and almost an infatuation that I just was so interested by it. It was so different to what the UK was like. I'd been on holidays to places in Europe, and again, it just looked totally different. I think I used to watch Bondi Rescue. That might be where the obsession started coming from. I just loved the vibe. It was really chilled out, really relaxed. Obviously, beautiful scenery. So I can remember being a very young age and just having this genuine interest in Australia and also this interest in wanting to live somewhere outside of the UK. Obviously, when you're a child, that doesn't happen. It's all depending on what your family want to do. But as I got older, it was something that I really felt within me that I would definitely be someone that wanted to go out and explore the world and as much of it as I could. When I was at college, I studied A levels. I was always really academic, always wanted that traditional route of going to college and going to university, getting a degree, and then climbing a career ladder. But when I was waiting for my A level results, I just had this urge come over me. Again, I can't pinpoint what made me do this, or there was no steps that led me up to it. But I went into town on my own and went into STA Travel. And some of you might remember they were a travel agent that mainly specialized in like gap years and extended tours. And I went in there, and you guys probably remember they used to have in the travel agents all of the magazines on one wall or the brochures on one wall. And I didn't even pick up any other countries. I just went straight for this one that was Australia and New Zealand. I remember going to have a conversation with this lady, and I can still picture her to this day. She was called Vicky. She was super helpful, super friendly. She spoke about a lot of the most popular routes that people do. And I'd say that she sold it to me, but actually, she didn't really need to sell anything to me because I already knew that it was what I wanted to do. I had got a place to study media at University of Brighton, but I went home and said to my parents, I'm going to defer my entry for a year. I'm going to take a gap year and I'm going to go and travel the east coast of Australia. This to them was probably really out of the blue. I was 18 years old. So that was kind of it. I had my mind set on it. I got a full-time job and worked as many hours as I could to save up the money to go on this East Coast trip. So I'd booked my flights and I'd booked them for 8 weeks in Australia to do the East Coast. And then I also booked to go to Fiji for 2 weeks and do some island hopping. And it was quite an open plan. I literally remember I booked 3 nights in a hostel in Sydney, and that was it. I had a Greyhound ticket and also had tickets booked to do the Whitsundays and Fraser Island, but that was like open dates. I didn't plan anything else. I did no research. I literally had that one brochure and that conversation with Vicky, and that was it. I did no other research. I didn't even know what to expect, what there was. I just went along and winged it, and I guess that was probably something with being young. You don't. I'd never done it before. Didn't know what to expect, but knew I was going to love it, and went and just completely threw myself into the experience. I just absolutely loved it. It's one of the happiest times of my life. I think it was just so eye-opening for me. It unlocked something in me which so many people say, and it sounds cliche, but it's like you never get that feeling when you're in your own country or even just going on holiday. It's completely new experience, meeting people from all over the world that you would never usually interact with. And you kind of discover a different side to yourself, I guess, as you're meeting people from different countries and different backgrounds. So I loved that aspect of it. I fell in love with meeting different people every day. So I went and did that trip, came home, and just felt like I'd left a part of me there. I was actually just so heartbroken when I was coming home. I didn't want to leave. I just didn't want to be at home. My friends who are probably listening will remember we used to go on nights out. I'd get drunk and then cry because I was like, I don't want to be in this country. I really need to be in Australia. And that would happen most times I went out. So it was probably really, really irritating for them. So I do apologize. But I just had this feeling of loss. It was really strange. I went to university, and when I was there, I was just like, this isn't what I want to be doing. I was still obsessed with wanting to travel and wanted to go back to Australia. My heart wasn't in it, so I decided to leave university, get another job to save up to go back and do the working holiday visa. I went and did a season in Magaluf from April to September, and then I came home and went to Australia from the November. So when I went back to Australia, it was on a working holiday visa, which I knew would be for 1 year indefinitely, with the option to obviously extend it. Again, I went completely on my own. So I was 21 at this stage on my own. It didn't phase me going on my own at all because I'd gone on my own the first time and I knew how easy it was to meet people. And I think I kind of went over there thinking it would be exactly the same, really easy to meet people. I'd settle in straight away. This is something that I've desperately wanted since the first time I went. When I flew into Melbourne as I didn't visit Melbourne on my first trip. So I wanted to go somewhere different. And I just didn't vibe with it. It just didn't feel like I was in Australia. Anyone that's ever been to Melbourne will say it is actually quite European. It's got lots of similarities to a European city. Really struggling to meet people there that I genuinely clicked with. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. I was thinking, have I made a big mistake? Have I got this all wrong? Have I just romanticized the experience that I had previously and put all my efforts into thinking I could recreate that? But obviously, I knew that I had to give it a bit of time. I didn't want to give in when it was something that I'd wanted for so long. And I'd met a DJ whilst I was working in Magaluf who was also going to be in Australia. Got in contact with him, and he was on the Gold Coast in a small little beach town called Coolangatta. I'd never heard of it before. Flew straight to the Gold Coast, I think, the next day. And yeah, just instantly felt like this is what I wanted. This is Australia. I would say the Gold Coast is what most people would imagine Australia to be like, is what the Gold Coast is like. It's golden beaches with crystal clear water. Everyone surfs, everyone's super laid back, really cool coffee shops and cafe culture. And I just loved it. The minute that I landed, I went down to the beach and could have cried with happiness. Just loved it. And I stayed there for 6 months. So made loads of friends, made friends with the locals, got some jobs, just enjoyed every single minute of it. Got to the point where I thought I've actually been here for half of my visa. I probably need to move on to the next stop. So then I went to do strawberry picking because I wanted to do my regional work to get my second year visa. And that was absolute. And I just thought, I can't do this. So I left there, moved in with some friends in Brisbane and stayed in Brisbane for a bit. Again, loved Brisbane, like super cool city, so much going on, little bit less busy than Sydney. So I quite like that more laid back vibe. And then my friend who was from home was in Australia at the same time. He was going to Bali. So I said, I'll come along to Bali. And a few days after I'd booked my flights, he called me back and said, my friend Aaron's going to come. So I said, that's cool. Obviously the more the merrier. Have a great time. So I flew to Perth to meet my friend and Aaron. And little did I know that Aaron would be the person that I'd then spend the rest of my life with. We did hit it off straight away, but as friends, we just got on so well. From the minute that we met each other, it was like we'd known each other for a really long. We went to Bali, had a great time, came back, and then a couple of my friends were doing their farm work packing potatoes, and they said, "Come here. The hostel's really good. The work pays." Aaron actually went there a week before me. He got a job, and then I followed after and went there and also got a job. So did 3 months of working in a factory packing potatoes. It wasn't as hellish as the strawberry packing. By the end of it, you were tired, you were sick of doing it. It was really long days. We were doing, I'd say, between 10 to 15-hour days, 6 days a week. We were living in the middle of nowhere in South Australia. It was beautiful, lots of vineyards, lots of wineries, lots of green countryside, but there was nothing there. So by the end of it, you really were ready to leave. Then left there, obviously had secured my second year visa just in time, by the way. I think I made it within like 1 week of my visa expired. Then flew to Sydney and spent 7 months in Sydney and had the best time. I absolutely loved it. I think I probably could have stayed there for the rest of my visa. I just had the best time, met the best people, had a really good job. And then I only had, a few months left of my visa, so I thought I probably should go and see a bit more of the country. I had travelled around within that time as well and done a little bit more exploring, but I had Sydney as my main base. I then flew up to Darwin and re-met up with Aaron as we had been separate. He wasn't in Sydney the whole time I was there. We met up in Darwin, and I love Darwin. It was, again, really, really party, not loads to do there, but it was good. But I had friends that I lived with in Sydney that were going to be living in Melbourne. So they said, why don't we all go and get an apartment together in Melbourne? And I'd thought I probably should give it another go. And I've got friends there this time, so it'll be a different experience. I kind of went full circle, which was funny. And then I ended my visa living in Melbourne. That is when me and Aaron actually got in a relationship. That's a whole different story, which I could probably tell at another time. So yeah, we started dating when we lived in Melbourne together, and the rest is history. That was 8 years ago now. And yeah, I just love living in Melbourne. Such a cool city. It was completely different being back there when I, one, already had friends, and two, had experienced so much more of Australia. It didn't feel so much like you were in that European city, or it didn't matter so much that it was completely different to what you expect Australia to be like, because I'd lived in places that were the typical Australian dream. Then Aaron and I travelled Southeast Asia on our way home. I wanted to come home for a bit, just spend a little bit of time at home, figure out what we want to do next, get a bit more money. And we came home and we really decided that we actually wanted to live in Australia. We didn't really want to go anywhere else. So we went to, it was called Down Under Live, and I think they still do them. But I vividly remember going to the Down Under Live and speaking to Wes from the Down Under Centre, which are an immigration agent that can help people move over to Australia. And I remember having a conversation with Wes, and at the time, Aaron was just about to start training to become a carpenter. So we said, would that trade allow us to be able to get back in with a visa? What would we need? What would the expectation be? And he talked us through it all and gave us that assurance, like, if Aaron does his training, you will be able to go over there and immigrate. So that was the plan then. Aaron was doing his apprenticeship in carpentry, which we would get to then be able to move to Australia. So we were just working towards that goal the whole time. And then we were at the point when Aaron was qualified and had enough experience to be able to start the process. And then COVID hit. And you guys were probably all the same. When COVID first hit, we thought it's only going to be 1 to 2 months and then everything will be fine. We had no idea what the impact and implications would be. So in around, I think it must have been around May of 2020, Aaron and I got in contact with the Down Under Centre again. We signed up with them. We started doing all the paperwork to do Aaron's skills assessment. And then Aaron was informed that he'd need to do this English test that was a 2-hour speaking, reading, listening, and writing exam. And to this day, he will say this wasn't the issue, but I know it was. He did one lesson for the English test, and it was hard, and we'd been told it is a really tough exam to pass, but we needed the points from the English test to get us enough points to be able to qualify to apply for a visa. And he suddenly had a change of heart. I don't want to go anymore. Let's just stay here. We've got our own house. I'm happy living here. And I know, and he'll probably kill me for saying this, knew within my core it was because he didn't think he would be able to pass the English test. And it was a lot of pressure on someone that isn't an academic learner. And I couldn't do anything to help him. He had to do the English test on his own. So we kind of had to push the pause button, which coincided, to be fair, with Australia completely closing their borders, not allowing anyone in, not processing any visas. So it didn't seem as much an issue because no one was moving over there anyway. So everything got on pause with that, and we carried on, obviously, doing what we could to live our lives in the UK whilst COVID was happening. But I still had this deep sense of, I still really, really want to move. So fast forward to the start of 2023. It was literally, I think, that New Year's Day or just around the New Year period. And I was, it sounds ungrateful, but I think other people that have been through this process or are going through the process will completely get me. I was just not happy living in the UK. I just couldn't see myself ever being happy living here. It was always as if I didn't fully belong here. I didn't want to be here. I didn't connect with here. Didn't feel like my place. And I felt like a completely different and happier person when I was in Australia. And I just knew that I needed to be there. So we had a serious conversation, and Aaron said, okay, let's try and give it a go again. So we got back into contact with the Down Under Centre in January of 2023 and started doing all the paperwork again for our visa. I am going to do another episode on our process that we've been through to date, so you can get a little bit more of an idea of what we've had to do to get to this point. So yeah, I was completely over the moon that Aaron was back on board. It was back on the cards. I knew, and I still do know, it's going to be a long process. It's going to be emotionally challenging at times, but I also know it's absolutely the right thing that I have to do with my life. And I just know that I'm going to feel so happy when I get there and so fulfilled. And it's just where I feel like I'm meant to be. Any of my close friends and family will know that. And, you know, they all know that it's where I truly will be happy. So I'm so excited. I wanted to start this podcast because immigrating to Australia is such a big move. It's not something that I actually feel is that big because it's something that I've always wanted. But when I speak to people and when I tell people it's what I'm doing, they are shocked, they're amazed, they're impressed. They don't have no understanding of everything that's involved with it. There are so many people going through the visa process that are in the same shoes as me and obviously have different scenarios. I know there are so many people out there that would also love to make this move, and I wanted to create a platform where I can share my story with you all, bring you along on the journey with me from the very beginning of trying to get a visa, going through the different stages of getting the visa, and then moving over there, setting my life up, and also sharing with you why I love it and why I've always wanted it and why I've invested all of my time and energy into being able to secure that visa. So I'm so excited to share everything with you guys. I will be sharing on my next episode what we've been doing to date and what we've had to do to get to the point that we're at and what will be coming up next. And so I really hope this platform will be there to guide you, support you, and I'm sure there'll be some funny stories that I can share with you along the way. So thank you for tuning in to the first episode, and I cannot wait to share my next episode with you guys. I'll speak to you soon.